Keith scratched his temple and smiled slightly. It's no big deal. When old friends meet, it's normal for them to catch up, you know? Catch up? Quinn smiled lightly as if she didn't need to ask any more questions. She looked at Keith and said, After your heroic bank rescue the other day, I looked into you. I know about your history with Christina and Blake, and now you've broken his nose. What if he wants to press charges? Can you afford a lawyer? Keith was surprised at her words, and he paused for a moment. Then he replied indifferently, Don't worry, I got my ways. A flicker of a smile appeared on his lips. Seeing his carefree manner, Quinn couldn't help but let out a sigh. I'll report this to Chief Cooper. I hope he'll be able to help you find a way to deal with this. After a moment, she added, Oh, and I saw the surveillance footage from the bank robbery. I didn't know you were trained in the hammer fist technique. Keith knew that someone would ask him about this eventually, so he'd already thought of an excuse. He nodded and replied, Yeah, I learned martial arts in my hometown as a kid. I never really thought it would come in handy. Quinn stared at him for a while. She realized that he wasn't panicking at all, so she nodded. I see. You've got good skills, Keith. Don't let them take you down the wrong path. Make sure you're never the one starting the trouble, you know? That kind of skill comes with responsibility, and it has to be used in the right way. Do you understand? Keith smiled lightly at her. Don't worry. I won't cause any trouble. You've satisfied Quinn's wish. Wish value, +1. Current wish progress, 4 of 10. Really? Keith thought to himself. Wow. He was overjoyed and decided to change the subject. So, Sergeant Taylor, what brings you over here anyway? Quinn gave a deadpan stare when she heard his question. She practically rolled her eyes. Seeing the precinct's Ice Queen actually show some emotion made Keith's heart jump, and he couldn't help but blush slightly. But if Quinn noticed his reaction, she didn't show it. She casually replied, I was just on my way home from work. Oh, by the way, I meant to tell you something. The leader of those bank robbers was a repeat offender. I'm proud of you. You did a great job. Repeat offender? Keith looked at Quinn in confusion and added, Is he the one who committed that series of armed robberies a few years back? Quinn nodded. Correct. I think he must have blown all his money and needed to get hold of some more. By the way, I've received a notice from the mayor's office. Due to your actions in the bank robbery, the chief nominated you for a Civilian Courage Award. The judges voted unanimously in your favor. The award comes with a check for $20,000. Quinn paused to glance at Keith. It also means they want to come to your house to do a celebratory press shoot, so make sure you're ready for that. She then handed him the check. Huh? Keith froze for a long moment before smiling ruefully. He wasn't keen on such fanfare, but if the mayor's office was involved, he knew it wasn't up to him. Besides, he could really use that $20,000. Keith hadn't done too badly at school, and he'd always got decent grades, but his family was way too poor to send him to college. He tried taking classes at the local community college for a while, but it didn't leave him enough time to earn a living, so he was left with no choice but to drop out and find full-time work. If he took the Citizens Award money, he could think about going back to school, or maybe even starting a business of his own. And the most important thing, the best part of it all, was that he had the system with him now. He gave Quinn a puzzled look. Wow, I mean, that's great and all, but you could have just called me to tell me all that. Why'd you come all the way here by yourself? After thinking about it, he was surprised. He had caught a serial bank robber, which was a great achievement. But after all, he was still just an outsider. He wasn't even a real police officer. And the idea of the award was pretty huge. Quinn, however, was his sergeant. She was highly qualified. She'd been in the team for years, and she'd risen through the ranks at an unprecedented speed. Naturally, she would get the highest credit. So, had this respected officer come all the way here to thank him, but found it so embarrassing that she'd made up an excuse? When Quinn noticed Keith looking at her with a faint smile on his face, the tips of her ears turned red, but she quickly looked away and said in a low voice, "I owe you a favor. Now, if there's nothing else, I'll be on my way." She turned and left along the same path they'd just come down. You shattered Quinn's desire to hide her gratitude. Attribute point +1. Watching her retreating figure, Keith smiled and called out, "Sergeant Taylor, why don't you come visit me empty-handed? Don't forget to bring fruit next time." He chuckled and went on, "I love grapes." Quinn stopped and looked back at Keith, who was grinning from ear to ear. The blush spread from her ears to her cheeks, and she spun back around and hurried away down the path. After saying goodbye to his beautiful sergeant, Keith didn't rush back into the hospital. Earlier, he'd received 4 attribute points from Blake's incident, and now he'd acquired 1 more with Quinn. That made 5 attribute points to distribute as he wished. After thinking for a while, he added 2 points to power, 2 to dexterity, and 1 to stamina. Now, his panel looked much better. Power, 11. Dexterity, 13. Stamina, 11. His power and stamina were now slightly higher than the average adult male, and at 13 points, his dexterity was equal to that of an athlete. With a smile full of satisfaction, he turned on the Eye of Detection. While using the Eye of Detection, any living being with a wish would emit a red light around themselves. Even though he already knew this, Keith was still stunned as he looked around. "Why is there so much red light around me?" he thought. The entire garden was filled with little floating red lights. He made his way over to the nearest spot of light and found that it was a group of ants carrying a grasshopper. "You guys have wishes as well?" Keith couldn't help but laugh. He threw the grasshopper into the ant's nest. You've satisfied the ant's wish to move their food. Wish value +1. Current wish progress 6 of 10. You've satisfied the carp's wish of being fed. Wish value +1. You can only obtain 2 wish values per day from non-human creatures. Your allocation has been filled for today. As expected, Keith murmured with a wry smile. Since non-humans couldn't increase his wish value anymore, he cast his eyes out of the garden. It was then that he considered a problem. There were many people with wishes, but not every wish was easy to fulfill. Some people wanted their